All right, part of my real job is technology integration, and I'm nervous about this, so thanks. My name is Lori Long. I have the pleasure to direct and coach at Gothenburg High School. I would like for you to participate in a little activity with me for a moment, if you would, and just close your eyes and imagine. Once upon a time, there was a team, and they had a coach, and they practiced every day. They did drills. They repeated the drills. They practiced the fine-tuning pieces of what they gave to their team. There were people who stood out as stars on the team. There are people who provide support for the team. And every day, at every one of those practices, they got better. And they practiced a lot. And then it was conference. Notice I didn't say anything in there about any games leading up to conference. So if you were imagining a volleyball team, or a basketball team, or a football team, or a cross-country team, or anything like that, they get all of those extra practices, all those extra performances to fine-tune their skills, to get evaluation and critique and improvement by competing against others, by getting feedback from others, sometimes from the crowd, to make their performance and their team the best that it can be. Why can't that be more so for play production? So that was my Matthew McConaughey, all right, moment. Okay, so what I am inviting you to do today is to think a little bit about that process, where we've been and where we're going, to give your students, your play production teams, the advantage and the opportunity to expand their season by learning more about their craft, by practicing and fine-tuning those skills, growing not only as performers, but as people, and in a shared community with a shared goal, improving every single time and using all of that that they gain to be competitive in this activity. So once upon a time, there's another story. I was a student at Kozan High School. I graduated in 1988, and I had the pleasure of having Patsy Crowe-Johns not only as my stepmom, but as my one act and speech coach. And she, along with Patty Stouts at Gothenburg and Galen Flood at Lexington, decided that we, at that time, didn't even have conference. Our one act season was districts, and if we won, we got to go to state. And so those three ladies got together one time and they said, hey, I want to see your show. I want my kids to see what you do. And so when I was a junior, I believe, was the first time those three ladies decided that we were going to have a Dawson County showcase. And I cannot tell you what that leveled up for our team those 2 years. Because Kozad was used to hosting, so we didn't ever have to practice setting it up or anything like that. But we also really didn't get an opportunity to see any other shows or our friends in those two towns. And so that was my first exposure to being able to travel. Because if you didn't make it to, if you didn't win districts, you didn't travel, right? You didn't go on. That was your season. And so I graduated, I went to college, I had the pleasure of coming back to Gothenburg, and those ladies had still continued that opportunity. So I got to take my teams for a couple of years to Kozad and to Lexington, and then I left Gothenburg for a while. I came back in 2005, started directing 1X there in 2007, and I wanted that kind of opportunity for my students beyond just the Dawson County Showcase. And so somebody, I don't even remember who, but I'm so thankful, introduced me to Amy Hosteller. And she was directing up at Loop City. And she had an invitational. How can I get in on that? I had no idea what I was walking into, what my kids were walking into. It turned out to be a well-oiled machine, and I wanted to copy that for myself. She was having at that time, I think, 12 teams, 14 teams, something like that in one day. And I knew that I couldn't, that was too much for me to take on at the moment. So I started with 5. What I really want to focus on is start small. And you don't have to have 5. You can just ask a friend and do what Patsy and Patty and Aileen did very many years ago, because A, that's math, and B, it tells you how old I am. So, in the room, how many of you have coached at least 10 years? Raise your hand. Of you who have coached at least 10 years, how many of you have been able to take your students to a contest or a festival or a workshop outside of conference and district? How many of you are hosting those? That's why we need you. In addition to what Taryn said, we need those opportunities, we need those places, and contrary to popular belief, you do not have to have a beautiful state-of-the-art auditorium like this to be able to pull it off. The first thing that you want to start with when you are putting this together is your guest list. So I like to think of this as a party because, you know, we're all friends and yeah. And so who do you want to invite? Again, it doesn't have to be anything big. Think about the towns that are around you. They might be somebody in your conference. It might be somebody who's a different classification. We're all pretty close together, and I think we're a pretty welcoming community. A couple of years ago, I had 2 teams that wanted to get into one of the 2 events that we host, and I wasn't able to squeeze them in, but I thought, you know, I want one more event or opportunity for my kids to travel, and so we made an Axtell, Aurora, Gothenburg triangular. And we each provided a judge that we cover the cost for, and that's the only cost that's involved. And if you have a friend who's a judge, maybe they would donate that opportunity for you. Maybe you have a former student who wants to get into judging and they need some practice. This would be an opportunity for them. Doesn't have to cost you anything to host. You just need to have the space and the willingness to take the lead. How many teams could you handle, or how many people can you handle? And that is something else that you need to consider when you're putting something like that together. But again, if you're only starting with 1 or 2 teams coming to your house, you know, just throw extra stuff in the closet, wipe off the floor, and there you go. Go team. You'll have space for it. How much time do you have for this event? Do you want to build up to it being a full school day? Or in the case of just a workshop or a triangular, just an evening? We work with our AD the week of the conditioning week before basketball season, between football, volleyball, and basketball season, that 1 week where there's just conditioning, no practice. Our team gets that week to have practice after school. So they can condition before school, they can condition in the evening. That's the one time that we get every kid after school. And so we try to schedule a triangular or a workshop with a neighboring school during that time, and then we're done by 6:30, like a normal coach. You don't have to, you can be flexible with that because you're the person hosting it. It's your party. You can schedule your party when you want to. When it works for you, when it works for your kids, and when it works for the other team or teams that want to come. You don't need to have perfect accommodations. I think one of the reasons that not many people volunteer to host is because they don't have a designated stage area, or maybe they don't have curtains, or maybe their lighting system is off and on. And I taught in a place like that, directed in Gothenburg 30 years ago. And that was what we had. But that is what we had. And that is what a lot of schools have. Our event is adaptable. You need to be able to move in, do the thing, move out. Sometimes you can't take your whole set. That's okay. Sometimes you don't have costumes. I can't tell you how many times we went to Loop City and our team didn't have costumes. We wore our team t-shirts and jeans. The point of it is to get your kids out there, exposed, give them the opportunity to perform, give them the opportunity to get that feedback, learn, grow, get better. So here is, did I put it on the spot? Maybe I did. All right. I added another slide, but I might have done that before Taryn put this, or after Taryn put this up here. There's a link when she shares the slide deck on that Make It Work of a picture of Cozad Elementary's Honor Choir musical. Cozad had a catastrophic storm come through last year and destroyed their theater. It did not destroy their theater program. They had to be inventive and adaptable, and they had the one act rehearsals were in a church. They chose a different site to host their events. But for this elementary production, they put tarps on the gym floor. They put tarps on the gym floor. They made backdrops and created wings with some hanging curtains, put some lights on a tree, and they had a show. And if you saw pictures of that show straight on, you would never have known that it was in the barn. That's the name of their gym. If you still just have off on in your gym, it will still work. Because the point of it is not what the sparkly is, the point of it is giving the kids the opportunity to perform, learn, and grow. So other things that you need to consider when you get comfortable adding more than one or two or three teams is how that you schedule that to stay on schedule and be respectful of everyone's time. I wish that I would have had the forethought to build in that technical theater judge break. That's really, really smart. Because A, it gives that person a break, but it also will give you a little bit of time to catch up on schedule if you waver from that a little bit. If you have a team that does take a little bit longer to set up, things like that. You also need to consider how many judges that you need and how you are going to compensate them. Are you going to give them just a flat rate per play? Are you going to follow the NSAA guidelines for districts or for state? Are you just going to beg them to be nice and donate their time? I've done all of those things. Again, make sure that you choose people who can give you great feedback, who can help your kids grow, and treat them kindly and compensate them for that. So this is an example of our schedule. We are now up to 15 teams, counting our own, on that 45-minute rotation. It took us a while to get to this. I copied a lot from Amy, I copied a lot from a lot of other schools. I've adapted things, I've stolen things from Becky at York. But this is how we arrange our schedule. The most important thing in this is that you have somebody who works in the back, in the unloading and loading zone to keep things moving, because that is where you really get sticky with that schedule. So you want somebody who is organized and can keep people moving. Once this starts and the schedule flows with that person in charge, everything else will fall into place the way it needs to. I have an additional, between the warm-up and the performance time, our Discovery Center is an ag classroom that's connected to our greenhouse. Big fat hairy beetle. When we, who cares about that, right? Well, I had to start caring about that because when we expanded beyond our 10 schools and we stretched beyond the school day, we had been using our gym as a hangout spot and a concession stand. But our big invitational is held during actual basketball season, not during that conditioning week. And so we clear out all of our teams at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They take their stuff out to their buses or to our hallway, and we make our gym available again for practices. And every 3 years we have a junior high wrestling meet at the same time as our big invitational. So I had to get creative in where can those additional teams get ready. That's where our Discovery Center comes in. So sometimes you have to think about additional spaces in your facility. But making this schedule available to all of the teams that perform also kind of emphasizes the importance of being able to stay on that schedule. And the more opportunities you have to practice setting up, tearing down, all of that kind of good stuff helps those kids. It's not just about the kids who are performing on stage, but it gives your set crew practice if you have a separate crew, and it gives your actors practice if they are also your stage crew, fitting into that timeline. So if you're going to have a party, and you know what your guest list is, you know where you're going to have the party and all of the different components of your building where you're going to allow your guests to be, you need to figure out when. And Tara talked about our season now technically begins on September 4th. I'm lucky if I know what play we're doing on September 4th, because I change my mind a lot. It will probably change again, I think I know, but I really don't. And district contests are December 1st through the 6th this year, so you have a lot of time in there. But when you consider all of the other things that our kids do, you need to work around that, and that limits the days and the time that you have on those days. So some other considerations. Do you choose a school day? Do you choose a Saturday? What works best for your team? Our facility allows us to have a normal school day, while we are hosting. Because I have a ton of volleyball players and softball players and cross-country runners, and I have a lot of hunters, I stay away from Saturdays. It just doesn't work. We do host one event on a Saturday. This year it's on November 1st, but our team doesn't participate in that. We just open up our school to other teams because we know the importance of being able to have that opportunity. But choose it, find a day, sit down with your AD, talk about what you need. Dressing rooms is a pretty big consideration, and that is something that, quite honestly, at Gothenburg, I do not do well because I don't have additional space. We just use regular restrooms that are right across the hall from our gym. It is not ideal, but it's the best we have. Teams who have been coming for a while know that situation, and a lot of them will come to our school already dressed in costume, just do makeup when they get there, to save them some prep time, but also, again, the hassle of getting all of those people in and out of the restrooms in time to do all the other things that you need. Do you have adequate parking? Because you know if grandma lives within 150 miles, she's going to come to that show, and you don't want her to have to walk half a mile to get to you. So can you reserve some parking spaces near your building for those people who are going to come as audience members and guests? Do you have enough places for them to sit? We had a season where we also had some flooding in our theater, and we had to take out a whole section of seats. We were kind of at the point where we had the other seats available. We didn't know if we would fill those up, but if we did, could we allow kids to sit on the floor if we didn't have bolts sticking up? So think about that. If your space is in a gym, can you put some tarps down on the floor and set chairs there for your audience, or do you need them to sit in the bleachers? If they sit in the bleachers, how does that affect where you set up? Things like that. I will be very, very honest with you. The two events that we host, we do not make money on from entry fees and things like that because we pay our judges well. We pay them mileage. We pay them what the state rate most of our entry fees are actually covering administrative costs. The money that we make comes from concessions and the gate. So you want to plan for how much food you have for those kids and their guests. You want to have some great food in your hospitality room. And most importantly, you want to make sure that you have the volunteers to pull it off, because you can't be in all of those places at once. So to get the party started, a little bit more to think about. Make sure that you have not only places for your people to sit, but again, do you charge admission? Question mark? You don't have to. Another way for you to make money if your program needs to be self-sufficient, or if you're only giving $500 from your school, but you need more money to just even cover royalties, let alone set or costumes or things like that. This is another way that you can do that. Make sure that you have space for students to hang out, because yes, they do watch each other, they do learn from each other, but they also need some place to just zone out or focus, or eat, or talk to the cute boy from the town that's 50 miles away. All of those things. Make sure that you have appropriate and safe loading and unloading zones, and that those are marked off, and that the other people in your building know that you need that space, so that they don't park closest to their door, but then they can't get out for 3 hours because there are horse trailers and other kinds of trailers and school buses that are blocking them in. Not that that's happened. A few times. And again, that volunteer availability is huge. So I have spreadsheets and lists of ways that I go about this. I know that Becky at York also does. Kyle Vincent hosts. Jeffrey Horner hosts. And I'm just saying those because those are the ones that I'm familiar with. I know some of you also have excellent resources. I'm happy to share any of those if you want anything more specific to go by. We all learn from each other. This is how we get better. You don't think that the star on your basketball team didn't grow up watching college and NBA basketball and see how things work before they first step on the court? We want kids to see this activity. We want them to see what we mean when we say, Cheeto, we need to be able to see your face. What happens when you turn all the way upstage? What happens when we can't hear your voice? Look at that amazing set. That is incredible. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do something like that? All of those things. Being a host or participating somewhere else gives those kids an opportunity to dream big and show more in a good way. It just makes me think of my principal, Caitlin and Erin. You know exactly where I'm going with that. Okay. What to do when? We always have things come up. There are outside interruptions. There was a district at Gretna a couple years ago. My brother was the tech director for that show. There was construction on the roof during their production, some pounding and things like that. You have to work around that. In that kind of case, it was a district. They had the opportunity to perform again without that obstruction or distraction. What happens if there's a weather emergency or somebody pulls the fire alarm? What happens if there is a medical emergency? I was one of the judges at North Platte a few years ago when there was a student who fell off the front of the stage. What happens? How do you handle that? If any of you are speech coaches or are aware of what happened at NSAA in Des Moines last month, just thinking through and having a plan, hoping that you don't have to execute the plan, but in today's world, sometimes we have to think beyond what we're used to. One of the last things that I want to talk about in the few minutes that I have left is that when you receive an invitation and you are asked to RSVP, please do. Just got through with a family wedding this past weekend. Those RSVPs were vital. Those of us who host, especially those of us who host big festivals or invitationals, when we get your RSVP, we're planning on that. And when I mentioned those administrative fees, we're planning on that money. Some of us have hard and fast, this is your deadline, I don't have your check, I'm gonna move to my waiting list because we all have waiting lists. Some of us are like, oh, that's okay, I'll extend it a little bit more, I'll give you another week, I'll give you another week. And then 2 weeks out, we have to back out. Get an email, sorry, we have this conflict came up, we're not gonna be able to be there. By that time, sometimes I don't have somebody on the wait list that can fill that spot. We had, for our festival this past year, we normally have 10 to 12 teams. We had 5. But I had already contracted judges for 6 plays each. The judge was driving from Lincoln, I had mileage for that. We already purchased all of those awards. Even with concessions, we lost money at that event. And I don't want to emphasize, I don't want to put any emphasis on the fact that this is a money maker for us, because it isn't so much. But when you accept that invitation, we as organizers are banking on you. You saw the schedule that we build, the programs that we make, the awards that we have, the judges that we have, the volunteers that are giving of their time. Please be mindful of that as well. If you haven't recently taken a look at the NSAA website for play production, there's the general information of this is our event, and here is our handbook, and this is what a ballot is, and all of that kind of good stuff. There is a tab that is resources for directors. And we've been blessed the last several summers to have a day like this, and beyond that, we used to have them in the NSAA office, and we were proud of our teeny tiny, it's not teeny tiny, but it felt like it because there's no way we could fit all of you in there, space, and have these kinds of workshops. But there are links to YouTube videos of past presentations with other topics that will be greatly useful to you. There is a calendar of play production, speech, and debate and middle school events, so you can see what other opportunities there are. But most importantly, what I would ask you to do today is partner up with someone here. Again, those of you who host, raise your hands. And those of you who need a place to be or are thinking about hosting, raise your hands. That should be all of us, right? But find somebody else who just wants an opportunity one evening. You can critique each other's shows. You don't even need to hire a judge. We've added a workshop opportunity this year on our calendar with North Platte. We have our triangular. We go to a festival at Kozak. We go to York, and we host our own. We have built a season, just like a volleyball season, just like a basketball season, just like a cross-country season, because we want to give our kids the opportunity to learn, grow, improve, take constructive criticism, and not only become better performers, but become better people. And we need everybody in this room to be able to do that. And so I invite you to take the risk, to a leap of faith, accept the invitation, extend an invitation, and at least find one other team this year that you can host and hopefully build into something a little bit bigger, stronger, faster, sparklier, but more importantly, something that will benefit your program and your kids. Thank you very much. I think we have just a few minutes, 3 minutes before the next speaker, so if you want to stand up and stretch,